The waitress noticed the sniper's reflection in a spoon and pulled the CEO down just in time. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a crisp autumn evening in Manhattan, and the upscale restaurant, Le Caprice, was filled with the hum of quiet conversations. The clink of silverware on fine china, the soft rustle of napkins, and the gentle murmur of waitstaff moving between tables set the stage for another night of high-profile dining. The elite of the city often frequented this establishment, and tonight was no different. But among them was one person who didn't belong, the waitress. Her name was Emily, and at first glance, she seemed just like any other server. She had the usual uniform, a black dress, polished shoes, and a calm, professional demeanor. But beneath the surface, Emily held a secret. She had been trained in more than just serving food. She was observant, quick-witted, and had a keen eye for details. And tonight, that attention to detail would make all the difference. At the far corner of the room sat the man of the hour, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, Marcus Stone. He was the kind of man whose presence dominated any room he entered, dressed in an immaculate tailored suit, his face sharp and unreadable. His reputation was built on hard deals and calculated risks. But tonight, something was off. Emily noticed it the moment she walked by his table. His posture was tense, his eyes darting around the room, and he seemed distracted. It wasn't unusual for high-profile figures to be on edge, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about him tonight. She moved past him again, this time delivering a glass of water, and that's when she saw it. A slight reflection in the polished spoon on the table. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the light. But as she leaned in closer, her stomach tightened. In the spoon's reflection, she saw the faint outline of a man, standing across the street outside the restaurant. The glint of a rifle scope caught her eye, and her heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, Emily's mind raced. She had no time to waste. She had to act fast. Her instincts kicked in, and without a second thought, she turned towards Marcus. He was too engrossed in a conversation with his colleague to notice her sudden movement. She approached him quickly, stepping up to his side as casually as she could, but inside, her pulse was racing. "Sir," she said quietly, "I need you to move now." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated by the interruption. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low. But Emily wasn't looking at him anymore. She was already reaching for his shoulder, pulling him down just as a shot rang out, the sound of it echoing through the room. The bullet missed him by mere inches, hitting the wall behind him instead. Panic erupted in the restaurant. Waiters dropped their trays, people screamed, and the entire room was thrown into chaos. But through it all, Emily remained calm. She hadn't just saved Marcus's life. She had done something that no one else in the room had been able to do. As the security team rushed in, Marcus's eyes met Emily's. He was speechless, stunned by what had just happened. He had no idea who this woman was, or what had just transpired, but one thing was clear. She was not just a waitress. As the chaos subsided and the police arrived to investigate, Marcus stood up, his legs unsteady. He looked at Emily, the woman who had saved him, and for the first time, he saw her not as an employee, but as something far more important. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse with gratitude. Emily just nodded, her expression unreadable, before she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of other waitstaff. But Marcus couldn't forget what had just happened. As the evening wore on, he couldn't shake the image of her face, the calm, collected woman who had saved him from certain death. And in that moment, he realized that sometimes, the people who seem the least important are the ones who make the biggest difference. Emily stood in the shadows of the bustling restaurant, her heart still racing from the near miss earlier that evening. The chaos had calmed down, but the adrenaline was still coursing through her veins. Marcus, the CEO she had just saved, was now surrounded by his security team, receiving a thorough check. His colleagues looked uneasy, their eyes darting between the crowd and the window, still not fully grasping what had just happened. But Marcus, ever the composed leader, remained silent, his eyes fixed on Emily as she continued to work. It was clear now that she was no ordinary waitress. Her quick thinking had saved his life, but there was more to her than met the eye. Emily had never considered herself a hero, but tonight, something had shifted. She had acted on instinct, and that instinct had not only saved a life, but had also caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in the city. As the night went on, Emily couldn't help but steal glances at Marcus, who was now seated in a corner, speaking to his security. His face was a mixture of confusion and gratitude. His gaze kept drifting back to her, as if he couldn't quite reconcile the idea of a waitress saving his life. But Emily didn't want to dwell on it. She had a job to do, and it was far from over. After everything had settled, Marcus had thanked her briefly, but there was something in his eyes, a mixture of awe and disbelief, that made her uneasy. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She was just doing her job. But Marcus wasn't letting it go. As the night drew to a close, the staff began to clean up, and the restaurant slowly emptied. The quiet hum of conversation faded into the background as Emily moved to the back to collect her things. That's when she saw him again. Marcus stood near the kitchen, waiting. "Emily," he called softly, his voice carrying over the clatter of dishes being washed. She froze for a moment before turning to face him. He stepped toward her, his sharp suit still impeccably pressed, but his expression was different. There was no arrogance in his gaze now, just a quiet intensity. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. Emily hesitated. She had done her job. She had saved him, but that didn't mean she owed him anything more. "I really should be getting home," she replied, her tone polite but firm. But Marcus didn't seem to take no for an answer. He took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "Please," he said, his voice dropping to a more personal tone. "I owe you more than a thank you. You saved my life tonight, and I want to know why. Why did you act so quickly? You didn't even hesitate." Emily looked away, unsure of how to respond. She had never been one to talk about her past. It was something she had buried long ago. But Marcus's curiosity was hard to ignore. "I just did what anyone would have done," she said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. Marcus didn't seem convinced. "No," he said softly. "You didn't. You knew exactly what to do. And that's not something you learn just by waiting tables." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had always been careful to keep her past hidden. The last thing she wanted was for someone to dig into it, especially not someone like Marcus. But there was something in his tone, something genuine, that made her pause. "Look," Marcus said, his voice softer now. "I know you're just doing your job, but you've got something. You've got a level of training I haven't seen in a long time. And I want to know what it is." Emily's mind raced. She could lie, but she wasn't sure if it would do any good. And for some reason, she didn't want to lie to him. She had saved his life, after all. It felt like she owed him the truth. I used to be in security," she said quietly, the words feeling strange on her tongue. "I worked for a private firm, handling high-risk situations. I left that life behind a few years ago." Marcus's eyes widened, and for the first time that evening, a flicker of real understanding passed between them. "So you're trained in what exactly?" he asked. Emily took a deep breath. "Tactical operations, close protection, that kind of thing," she explained. "But it's been a while. I wasn't expecting to ever have to use it again." Marcus nodded slowly, taking in her words. "You're not just a waitress, are you?" he said, his voice low. "No," Emily replied quietly. "I'm not." The silence stretched between them for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "Why did you leave that life?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken curiosity. Emily shifted uncomfortably, not sure if she was ready to open up about that part of her life. "It's complicated," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Sometimes things happen that make you realize you can't keep living the way you were." Marcus seemed to sense her hesitation and didn't press further. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. But I need you to know, what you did tonight, it wasn't just a lucky break. You saved my life. And I'm not going to forget that." Emily looked at him, meeting his gaze for the first time fully. There was a sincerity in his eyes that made her heart beat a little faster. She had saved his life, yes, but in return, he had offered something she hadn't expected: respect. "I didn't do it for recognition," she said, her voice steady. "I just did what I had to do." Marcus studied her for a long moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. I don't know what's next for you, he said finally, but I want to find out. I think you could be a valuable asset to my team. Emily was taken aback. Your team? She asked, her eyebrows furrowing in confusion. You saved my life, Emily. And I don't forget people who do that. There was something in his voice now, something that hinted at more than just gratitude. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. This was not what she had expected. Not in the slightest. She had only meant to do what was right, not to be dragged back into a world she had left behind. But Marcus's offer, though unexpected, was a lifeline, a chance to leave behind the mundane and step back into the world she had once known. Think about it, Marcus said, his voice softening. I'll be in touch. Emily watched him leave, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. She had saved his life, yes, but what would saving him cost her? It had been 3 days since Marcus had offered Emily the chance to rejoin the world she thought she had left behind. She had spent those 3 days carefully considering his words, weighing the offer against the life she had built for herself in the quiet corners of New York. The world she had once known, the world of tactical operations, high-stakes security, and close protection, was one she had chosen to walk away from. But Marcus's offer tugged at something deep inside her. She had been living a simple life for the past few years, trying to forget the past, trying to leave behind the chaos and danger that came with her former work. But now, as she stood at the threshold of a decision that could change everything, she wasn't so sure anymore. Emily had always been careful, controlled, keeping her past buried under layers of normalcy. But there was a reason she had left that life behind, a reason she had chosen to serve meals in a restaurant instead of protecting billionaires. It wasn't just about safety, it was about escape. Escape from the constant pressure, the risks, the never-ending demands. But as the days passed, the more she thought about Marcus's offer, the more she realized she missed that sense of purpose, that feeling of doing something significant. That night, as she stood in her small Brooklyn apartment, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Emily. Marcus's voice was unmistakable, calm, but with an urgency beneath it. It's Marcus. I've been thinking about what you said. About your hesitation. Emily swallowed. And I think it's time we talk more seriously, he said. I know this isn't easy, but I need you. I need someone with your skills. Emily closed her eyes. She had known this was coming, but hearing him say it aloud made the reality of the situation even more pressing. I've been out of the game for a while, Marcus, she replied, her voice steady but laced with doubt. I'm not sure I can just jump back in. I don't need you to jump back in, Emily, Marcus said quickly. I need you to step up, to use what you know in a way that matters. It's not about going back to what you were. It's about moving forward, using your talents to protect what's important. Emily's breath hitched. There was a sincerity in his voice that she hadn't expected. She had always been used to seeing Marcus as this powerful, untouchable figure, the man who made decisions that affected thousands of lives, who never seemed to hesitate. But now, in this moment, she saw a different side of him, a side that needed help, that recognized the value of someone who could see things from a different perspective. I don't know what you're asking, Marcus, Emily said quietly. What's in it for me? There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're asking the right question, Marcus replied, his tone now softer. I'll be honest with you, Emily. This isn't just about business. There's a larger threat on the horizon, one that's much bigger than I anticipated. And I need someone I can trust to help me navigate it. Emily felt her pulse quicken. What kind of threat? I can't go into specifics just yet, Marcus said, but it's serious. I'm dealing with enemies I never thought I'd have to face again. People who are much more dangerous than they appear. And they're targeting everything I've worked for. Emily's mind raced. She had left that world behind for a reason. She had moved on, buried the ghosts of her past, and started fresh. But now, Marcus was asking her to go back to that world, to put herself in danger again. What's my role in all of this? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts running through her mind. I need you to be my eyes and ears, Marcus replied. To help me identify threats before they strike, to protect the people who matter, and to stop whatever is coming before it's too late. Emily was silent for a long moment, considering his words. This was what she had been trained for, what she had spent years perfecting. But was she ready to step back into that life? To risk everything again? She couldn't answer right away, but there was something inside her that felt alive again. The weight of the decision was heavy, but in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't ready to walk away from this just yet. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice firm. "But I'm doing this on my terms, Marcus. No more secrets. No more running. Deal?" he said, a note of relief in his voice. "You've got my word. Let's make this work, Emily." Together. As Emily hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement swirl within her. She was stepping back into a world she had fought to leave behind. But now, there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever before, and she was ready to face whatever came next. As she looked out the window at the city below, she knew her life would never be the same. The past was calling her back, and this time, she wasn't running away. The next few days were a whirlwind for Emily. She had made the decision to return to the world she thought she had left behind. Marcus's words echoed in her mind as she prepared for what was to come. There was no turning back now. She had agreed to help him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something much bigger than herself. She hadn't known exactly what to expect when she agreed to join him, but the gravity of the situation became apparent the moment they met again. Marcus had arranged a private meeting in his penthouse, a sleek, modern space overlooking the city. As Emily stepped inside, she was immediately struck by the contrast between her own simple apartment and the luxury that surrounded her. It wasn't just the design. The space exuded power, authority, and wealth. Marcus sat behind a massive desk, his posture rigid, his face reflecting the weight of the decisions he had been making. As soon as he saw her, he motioned for her to sit. "I'm glad you came," he said, his tone still serious but with a touch of warmth. Emily took a seat across from him, her eyes scanning the room, absorbing the details. "I need to brief you on what's been going on," he continued. "This isn't just about protecting me anymore. It's about protecting everything I've built." Emily nodded, keeping her gaze fixed on him. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" she asked. "You said it's bigger than we thought." Marcus sighed, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk as he considered his words carefully. "It's a network, Emily. A network of powerful individuals who've been operating under the radar for years. They've been pulling strings, making deals in the shadows, and now they're targeting my company. I've been trying to figure out who's behind it, but it's like trying to catch smoke." Emily listened intently, her mind processing the information. "And what do you want me to do?" she asked. "I need you to help me get ahead of them," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I can't do this alone. I need someone who can think like they do, someone who can see things from a different angle." Emily leaned back in her chair, thinking. She had no illusions about the danger involved, but she had faced worse in the past. "You think I can outsmart them?" she asked. Marcus's eyes met hers, his gaze unwavering. "I know you can," he said simply. The confidence in his voice was both reassuring and unnerving. Emily's mind was racing. This wasn't just a simple job. It was a battle of wits, of power, and of survival. And she was about to be right in the middle of it. "What's the first step?" she asked, her voice calm, but with a hint of determination. "We need to gather intel," Marcus said, leaning forward. "We've got to find out who's behind this before they make their next move. We'll start by looking at my closest business associates, the ones who might be involved." Emily nodded. "I'll start with the data you have. Give me access to your network and security systems." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think you can get into my systems?" he asked, half amused. Emily smiled faintly. "I've done it before," she said. It wasn't a boast, just the truth. She had once been part of a team that infiltrated some of the most secure systems in the world. "All right," Marcus said, standing up. "I'll have my team set you up with everything you need. We've also got some leads we're following, but I want you to focus on the people we've already identified. It's likely one of them is involved." "Understood," Emily replied, standing as well. "I'll get to work." "And Emily," Marcus called after her as she reached the door. She turned to face him. "Be careful. This isn't just about money anymore. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests." Emily nodded. "I know," she said. As she stepped out of the penthouse and into the elevator, her mind was already working through the next steps. She had done this before, gone after enemies who had hidden in plain sight, protected by wealth and power. But this felt different. This wasn't just a game of tactics. There were lives at stake, Marcus's, her own, and potentially many others. She had agreed to help him, but she couldn't help but wonder what she was truly walking into. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, seeing a message from an unknown number. The game is just beginning. She froze for a moment, her heart racing. Who was this? What did they know? And how had they found her so quickly? She looked around, her instincts kicking in. She needed to stay focused. There was no room for distraction. Not now. Not when she was this close to uncovering the truth. She typed a quick reply. Who is this? Before she could hit send, another message came through. Asterisk, you don't need to know yet. But you'll see soon enough. The people you're working for are not who they seem. Asterisk, Emily's stomach dropped. Was someone else onto them already? She quickly hit send and slipped the phone back into her pocket. There was no time to waste. She had a mission to complete, and nothing, not even cryptic threats, would stop her now. As she made her way to the building's underground garage, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something far darker than she had anticipated. She had come back for a reason, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. But there was no turning back now. The game had begun. Emily had been at the underground parking garage for only a few minutes when her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, feeling the weight of the conversation in her hand. Who is this? She had typed earlier, now waiting for a reply. The next message appeared quickly. Asterisk, don't trust him. Marcus Stone is not who you think he is. Asterisk, the words hit like a punch to the stomach. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her instincts kicked in. She glanced around, her mind racing. Who could this be? How had they found her so quickly? She had been careful. She always had been. But now, someone was playing the game on a much bigger level than she had anticipated. She quickly scanned her surroundings. No sign of anyone suspicious, but the feeling of being watched hung in the air. Her eyes flicked to the shadows between the rows of parked cars, but nothing seemed out of place. Her phone buzzed again. Asterisk, they're using you, Emily. You're being set up. Don't believe a word he says. Asterisk, Emily tightened her grip on her phone. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her mind kept circling back to the same question. Was Marcus involved in something darker than she had initially thought? She had seen the way he looked at her when they had spoken, the way his eyes had lingered as if weighing her every word. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who carried the weight of power and secrets, and Emily had the sinking feeling that she was in the middle of something she couldn't fully understand. She had trusted him to an extent, but now, doubt was creeping in. She hit the reply button. Why should I trust you? The phone remained silent for a few moments before another message came through. Asterisk, because I know the truth. And so do you. You're not just another pawn in this game. You're the key. Asterisk, Emily paused. The key? What did that even mean? Her mind raced with possibilities. She was about to walk into a war she hadn't anticipated. Her phone buzzed once more. Asterisk, they're planning something. Something big. And you're in the middle of it. You've been targeted, Emily. They've been watching you for a long time. You have to get out of there. Asterisk, Emily's stomach twisted. She could feel the walls closing in, the weight of the unknown pressing on her chest. She was standing in a parking garage, miles away from the safety of her small Brooklyn apartment, and now this, an anonymous tip telling her she was in danger. Was she really? And if so, from who? She glanced up as she heard the sound of footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Her body tensed, every muscle on alert. She slowly turned toward the sound, her heart pounding. A figure emerged from the shadows, walking with purpose toward her. It was him, Marcus. Her breath caught. He had a calm, measured look in his eyes, but there was something different about him now. There was a tension, an unspoken understanding between them that wasn't there before. Emily, he said, his voice low, we need to talk. She didn't respond immediately, still processing the messages, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm in the middle of something, Marcus continued, stopping just a few feet away from her. There's a lot more happening than you realize, and it's not just about protecting me anymore. I didn't want to bring you into this, but it's too late. I need your help. Emily felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. Was this it? Was he about to confess something? She needed answers, but a part of her hesitated. I've been getting some messages, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. And they're saying you're not who you say you are? That I'm being used. Marcus's expression didn't change, but she saw a flicker of something. Was it guilt? I can explain, he said quietly, taking a step closer. But not here. Not now. Emily's mind was a flurry of conflicting thoughts. She wanted to trust him, she really did, but the more she learned, the more the pieces didn't fit together. Something was off, and she couldn't ignore it. "I'm done running," she said, her voice firm. "I need to know what's really going on, Marcus. Everything. No more lies." Marcus took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. For a moment, he seemed to consider his words carefully. "I didn't want you to be involved, Emily," he said finally. "But you're right. You deserve to know the truth. There's an organization, a group of people who want control, not just of my company, but of everything. And they've been pulling the strings for a long time. I've been trying to stop them, but they're everywhere. And now, they've turned their attention to you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me?" Marcus looked at her, his eyes dark with urgency. "Because you're the one who can stop them. You're the only one who sees what they're doing, who can piece together their plans. That's why they're watching you. That's why they want you gone." Emily took a step back, her mind reeling. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air. She had thought she was just helping Marcus, that her role was simple, to provide protection. But now, it seemed much more complicated. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't sign up for this. I was just trying to live a quiet life." Marcus reached out, gently grasping her arm. "I know you didn't. But you've already done more than you realize. You've already saved my life. Now it's time to finish this. It's time to stop them." Emily looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She was already in too deep to turn back. Whatever this was, it was going to be the fight of her life. "Let's do it," she said, her voice steady now. "I'll help you. But we do this my way." Marcus nodded, his eyes locked with hers. "Deal," he said softly. And with that, the decision was made. They were in this together now, no turning back. The days following their agreement were a blur of strategy, planning, and quiet tension. Emily and Marcus had settled into a rhythm, the urgency of their task pulling them both into a world that was darker and more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. They worked in silence, often late into the night, analyzing every lead, every piece of information that might bring them closer to the truth. The closer they got, the more Emily realized just how deep the conspiracy ran. It wasn't just about Marcus's company. It was about power, control, and a network of people who would do anything to protect their interests. Emily was no stranger to danger, but this was different. She wasn't just protecting a client. She was involved in something much bigger, something that would require everything she had. One afternoon, as they sat in a dimly lit office, going over files and connections, Marcus looked up from his laptop. "We're getting closer," he said, his voice low. "But we need more. I think we're missing something important." Emily looked at him, her gaze steady. "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "We've been looking at this from one angle, but there's another I think we've overlooked. It's not just about the business deals. It's about who's backing them, the people in the shadows." Emily's mind raced. "So, you think this is bigger than we realized? That someone's pulling the strings?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Exactly. And I think we know who it is. But we need proof." Emily stood up, her fingers brushing the edge of the desk as she moved to the window. The city stretched out before her, a vast network of power and influence, much like the one they were trying to unravel. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice firm. "We need to get into their headquarters," Marcus said, his tone hardening. "We need to see who's involved at the top. If we can find the key players, we can bring them down." Emily felt a chill run through her. It wasn't just about gathering information anymore. This was a full-on operation. They were about to infiltrate the heart of a dangerous network, and the risk was enormous. "How do we do that?" she asked, turning to face him. Marcus's eyes were sharp, focused. "I've got a contact," he said. "Someone who can get us inside. But we have to move fast. The longer we wait, the more they'll tighten their grip." Emily nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. "I'll get the gear," she said. "We'll need everything, disguises, access codes, and backup plans in case things go south." Marcus's gaze softened for a moment, and he stepped closer. "You don't have to do this, Emily. I can handle it myself." She met his gaze without hesitation. "You're not alone in this. I gave my word, Marcus. I'm in. All the way." He gave a short nod, and they both turned their attention back to the task at hand. Over the next few days, they prepared in silence. each piece falling into place with eerie precision. Emily had always been good at staying one step ahead, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. They had to get inside the headquarters, gather the intel, and get out, all without alerting anyone to their presence. The night before the operation, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with what-ifs. What if something went wrong? What if they were caught? What if this was the last time she would see Marcus? She shook the thoughts from her mind and forced herself to focus. There was no room for doubt. Not now. She had come too far. The following morning, they met at a quiet cafe in the city, far from prying eyes. Emily was already in her disguise, simple clothes, her hair pulled back, a pair of dark glasses hiding her eyes. Marcus had donned a new identity as well, blending in with the others who frequented the area. They exchanged no words as they sat down across from one another, both fully aware of the risks. "Ready?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "Let's go." They walked out of the cafe, their footsteps echoing in the empty street as they made their way to their destination. The building loomed ahead, its sleek exterior hiding the secrets it held within. As they approached the entrance, Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. They were about to infiltrate one of the most dangerous organizations they had ever encountered. The guards at the front were easily bypassed. Emily had handled security systems before, and with Marcus's help, they were able to slip inside unnoticed. The air inside was cold, sterile, and filled with the hum of technology. It felt like they were walking into the heart of the beast. The deeper they went, the more the tension in Emily's chest grew. Every hallway, every door, every turn held the possibility of danger. They reached the main office without incident, and Marcus began to work on the computer system. Emily kept watch, her eyes darting from side to side, ready for anything. As Marcus typed in the final code, the door to the office opened, and a man stepped inside. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It was one of the people they had been tracking. The man looked directly at them, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold and calculating. Emily's mind raced. She had been ready for this. She wasn't about to back down now. "We were just leaving," she said, her voice steady. But the man wasn't convinced. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "You're not going anywhere." The tension in the air was palpable as the man stepped closer, his cold gaze locking with Emily's. She felt her heart rate pick up, but her body remained steady. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. This wasn't just a simple mission. This was personal now. The man, tall and imposing, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. He knew they weren't just ordinary intruders, and the realization seemed to make him more cautious. "I don't know what you're after," he said, his voice low and controlled. "But you're not going anywhere." Marcus was still at the computer, his fingers working quickly as he tried to finish gathering the data they needed. Emily's mind was racing, but her focus was sharp. She needed to buy Marcus more time. "We're not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice calm and measured. "We just need the information. Once we have it, we'll leave. No harm done." The man didn't buy it. His lips curled into a cold smile as he took another step forward. "You think I'm just going to let you walk out of here with everything we've worked for?" Emily's muscles tensed, her instincts screaming that things were about to escalate. She glanced quickly at Marcus, who was still typing away, oblivious to the tension building in the room. She needed to act fast. "We don't want to fight," she said, trying to keep the conversation going, "but we will if we have to." The man snorted. "You really think you can take me on? You're in my world now." Emily could feel the weight of his words. She had no idea who this man was, but she didn't need to. What mattered was the threat he posed to their mission. She was running out of time. As the man took another step toward her, Emily's hand shifted slightly toward the small pistol concealed beneath her jacket. Her fingers hovered over it, ready to draw at a moment's notice. She had trained for situations like this, but the real danger was not just physical. It was in the game of control and manipulation they were both playing. If he realized she was armed, he would respond immediately. She needed him distracted. "What's your name?" Emily asked suddenly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. The man paused, his eyebrows furrowing slightly at the unexpected question. "You think I'm just going to tell you my name?" he sneered. "Why not?" Emily replied coolly. "You seem so confident." Thought I'd at least try to know who I'm dealing with before this gets ugly. It was a gamble, but it worked. The man faltered, just for a moment, a slight flicker of doubt crossing his expression. Emily took a step back, trying to keep him talking. You know, I'm sure you're a smart guy, she said, her tone light. But you've made a huge mistake by underestimating us. She saw his eyes narrow as he realized what she was doing. I'm not underestimating you, he growled. I'm just giving you a chance to walk away. If you don't take it, things are going to get ugly for you. Emily knew it was time. Marcus, she called softly, her voice steady. I need that data. Now. Marcus's hands flew over the keyboard, his eyes focused, and for a split second, the man in front of Emily shifted his attention, just enough for Emily to make her move. With one swift motion, she drew the gun, pointing it directly at the man's chest. His eyes widened, the confidence draining from his face as he realized what was happening. Stay back, Emily ordered, her voice cold and authoritative. We don't want to hurt you, but if you try to stop us, I won't hesitate. The man froze, his gaze flicking between the gun and Marcus, who had finally finished pulling the data they needed. You're too late, Emily added, her eyes locked on his. We already have what we came for, and you're not going to stop us. The man's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. You'll regret this, he muttered, but Emily didn't flinch. Maybe, she said, her voice unwavering. But not today. Without another word, Emily turned on her heel, motioning for Marcus to follow. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing through the halls as they made their way to the exit. As they reached the stairwell, Emily glanced over her shoulder, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The man was still standing there, watching them go, but he didn't make a move. They had won this round. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Emily's mind began to process the next step. They had what they came for, but this was far from over. The man in the building wasn't the only one they had to worry about. There were still others, more powerful, more dangerous, who would stop at nothing to protect what they had. And Emily knew that the only way to stop them was to keep moving, to stay one step ahead. What now? Marcus asked, his voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. We take what we've got and disappear, Emily replied, her eyes scanning the street for any sign of danger. We don't stop until we bring them all down. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, but Emily didn't feel fear. She felt something else, resolve. Whatever came next, she was ready. They were in this together, and they weren't going to stop until the job was done. The night air was thick with tension as Emily and Marcus hurried through the empty streets, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They had secured the data they needed, but they both knew it wasn't over yet. As they turned down a narrow alleyway, Emily's eyes constantly darted from shadow to shadow, her senses heightened. It was too quiet, too still. Marcus kept pace with her, but he was visibly tense, his usual calm demeanor slipping slightly. We can't stop now, he said under his breath, his eyes scanning their surroundings. Emily didn't respond, but she agreed. They couldn't afford to be caught now. Every move they made had to be perfect. They were already too deep into this. They needed to get to a safe house and lay low until they could process the information they had stolen. The problem was, they couldn't trust anyone, not even the people they had been working with. We need to figure out who's really behind this, Marcus continued, his voice tight with frustration. We can't let it end like this. Emily nodded, her mind racing through the possibilities. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, she said, her voice steady. We'll find out who's pulling the strings, and we'll make them pay. Marcus stopped in his tracks, turning to face her. This isn't just about revenge, he said sharply. This is about survival. For both of us. Emily met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. I know, she said, but I won't stop until I know the truth. I won't stop until they're all gone. Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he nodded. All right, he said. Let's finish this. They continued down the alley, keeping to the shadows, their movements precise and controlled. Every step was calculated, every sound carefully measured. The safe house was only a few blocks away, but the closer they got, the more Emily's instincts screamed that something was off. As they approached the door, Emily held up a hand to stop Marcus. She scanned the street ahead, her sharp eyes catching the faintest movement in the distance. Something's wrong, she whispered, her voice low. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he followed her gaze. A black SUV was parked at the corner, its headlights off, but Emily knew better than to trust that it was just a coincidence. "It's a setup," she muttered. "We've been compromised." Marcus cursed under his breath. "We need to move, now." They turned quickly, heading back down the alley, but before they could reach the next corner, a voice shouted from behind them. "Stop right there." Emily spun around, instinctively drawing her gun as a group of armed men emerged from the shadows. They were fast, precise, and well-coordinated. She could tell they were professionals. "Run!" she shouted to Marcus, pushing him forward. They didn't have time to fight. The odds were against them. The men were closing in fast, and Emily knew that they wouldn't hesitate to shoot. Marcus turned, pulling her with him as they sprinted down the alley. Their footsteps echoed off the walls, but the sound of pursuit grew louder behind them. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she scanned the street ahead for an escape. "We need to split up," she said breathlessly. "We can't outrun them together." Marcus hesitated, his eyes flicking to the men gaining on them. "Are you sure?" he asked. "It's the only way," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'll take the back exit. You go around the front. We'll meet at the safe house." "All right," Marcus said, his voice clipped. "Be careful." Emily didn't respond. She was already moving, slipping into a side alley that led behind the building. The men would have to split up to catch both of them, but Emily knew she couldn't rely on that. She had to keep moving. She reached the back exit and paused for a moment, listening. She could hear the sound of the men's footsteps growing closer, but they hadn't spotted her yet. She glanced over her shoulder, and just as she did, a shadow moved in the corner of her eye. Before she could react, a hand clamped over her mouth, and she was yanked back into the darkness. Panic surged through her as she struggled, but the grip was firm, unyielding. "Quiet," a voice hissed in her ear. Emily's heart raced. She didn't have time to process who it was or what was happening. She had to fight back, to escape. With all her strength, she twisted in the grip, using her elbow to strike behind her. The man grunted in pain but didn't release her. In that split second, Emily's instincts kicked in, and she shifted her weight, using her knee to push him off balance. She spun around, pulling her gun from its holster as she aimed it at the man in front of her. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cold. The man's hands shot up in surrender, but there was no fear in his eyes. "Easy there," he said, his voice calm. "I'm here to help." Emily's mind was racing. Was he lying? Or was this another twist in the game? She kept the gun aimed at him, but her muscles were tense, ready for whatever came next. "Help? Who sent you?" she asked, her voice sharp. The man smiled faintly, lowering his hand slowly. "You're not as predictable as I thought," he said. "But we don't have time for this. You need to come with me. Now." Emily didn't lower her gun. "Not until you tell me who you are." The man sighed, his expression unreadable. "My name is Leo," he said, "and I'm on your side. For now." Emily wasn't sure whether to trust him, but she didn't have much of a choice. The sound of approaching footsteps was growing louder. "This way," Leo said, motioning to the narrow side street ahead. Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She didn't know who Leo was or what he was up to, but one thing was certain. They were all in danger, and she needed all the help she could get. Without another word, she followed him, hoping she hadn't just made a terrible mistake. Leo led Emily through the narrow side street, moving quickly and with purpose. The sound of footsteps behind them echoed in the empty alley, growing closer by the second. Emily's instincts screamed at her to be ready, to stay alert, but Leo seemed completely unfazed. His pace never faltered as he guided her down the twisting path, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a calm that only made Emily more suspicious. She had no idea who this man was or why he had intervened, but the fact that he had chosen to help, at least for now, gave her a fleeting sense of relief. But relief was dangerous in a world like this. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, her voice low, her eyes still darting to every shadow around them. Leo didn't respond immediately, his focus still on the road ahead. But then he glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Somewhere safe. For now," he said. "We don't have much time." They kept moving, and as they rounded another corner, Emily noticed a small black van parked at the end of the alley. The doors were open, and two men stood by the vehicle, looking as though they were waiting. Leo motioned for Emily to follow him as he walked briskly toward the van. "Get in," Leo said, his voice sharp. Emily hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking between the men and Leo. She wanted to trust him, but her instincts told her to be cautious. Still, with the danger closing in from every side, she knew they didn't have much of a choice. She stepped forward, her hand still on her gun, but as she got closer, one of the men stepped forward and gave her a nod. "It's clear," he said. Emily looked over at Leo, who gave her a quick nod. She didn't question it. She climbed into the van, sliding into the back seat. Leo followed her inside and slammed the door shut behind him. The vehicle rumbled to life as the engine roared, and they sped off into the night. Emily took a deep breath and finally allowed herself to relax, just a little. She looked at Leo, her mind still racing with questions. "All right, I'm here," she said, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "Now start talking. Who the hell are you, and why are you helping us?" Leo sat across from her, his face illuminated by the dim light from the dashboard. "I'm someone who's been following the situation," he said calmly. "I know what you're up against." Emily raised an eyebrow. "And you're just offering help?" "Just like that." Leo gave a small, humorless smile. "Not exactly. I'm not here out of the goodness of my heart." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Then what's in it for you?" Leo's gaze met hers, and for the first time, she saw something more than cold calculation in his eyes. "I have my own reasons," he said, his voice lowering. "But right now, we have bigger problems to deal with." "Like what?" Emily asked. "Who's behind all of this?" Leo paused for a long moment, his eyes flickering to the window as if weighing whether or not to reveal more. "You've been tracking the wrong people," he said finally. "Marcus Stone isn't the target. He's being used." Emily felt a chill run through her. "Used? By who?" Leo leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. "There's a higher power at play here. Marcus's company, his deals, they're just a front. The real enemy is far more dangerous, and they've been manipulating everything from the shadows." Emily's mind whirled as she processed his words. "You're telling me Marcus is being played? That this is bigger than him?" Leo nodded slowly. "Exactly. And you've been walking straight into it. You've been targeted, just like him." Emily clenched her fists. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it from Leo made it all the more real. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "We need to stop them before they make their move," Leo said, his tone resolute. "But we can't do it alone. We need more information. We need to know who's really pulling the strings." Emily's eyes hardened. "And you think you can help us with that?" Leo met her gaze. "I can, but it's going to take all of us working together. We'll have to infiltrate their ranks, get closer to the source, and gather the intel we need. It won't be easy, but it's the only way." Emily leaned back in her seat, processing what Leo had just said. She had always known that this mission wasn't going to be simple. But now, everything she thought she understood was being flipped upside down. "How do we even begin to trust you?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Leo's eyes softened, and for a moment, the walls he had built around himself seemed to crack. "You don't have to trust me yet," he said quietly. "But I'm your best shot at getting out of this alive." The van hit a sharp turn, and Emily's body was pressed against the seat. She looked out the window, the dark streets flying by, her mind filled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. She had no choice but to trust Leo, for now. As much as she wanted to believe that she was still in control of the situation, she knew that the truth was far more complex. This wasn't just a fight to protect Marcus anymore. This was a fight for their lives. And she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. She had made it this far, but the real battle was just beginning. As the van sped through the quiet streets, Emily's mind raced with the new information Leo had just shared. Marcus Stone was being manipulated. The situation was far more complicated than she had originally thought, and now she was caught in the middle of a much larger conspiracy. She glanced over at Leo, who was sitting across from her, his expression unreadable. Despite the chaos unfolding around them, he was calm, too calm. She still didn't know if she could trust him, but for now, he was her only ally. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice low, trying to mask the unease she felt. Leo didn't look at her, his focus entirely on the road. "We're heading to a safe house," he replied. "You'll be able to lay low for a while, regroup, and then we'll figure out our next move." Emily wasn't sure what to expect at the safe house, but the way Leo spoke made it sound like this wasn't a place she could trust completely. Still, it was their best option. The van turned sharply into an alley, the headlights briefly illuminating the shadowed surroundings before they stopped in front of a discreet, nondescript building. Leo turned to Emily. "Stay close," he said. "We can't afford to be seen." Emily nodded and followed him out of the van. They moved quickly, their footsteps barely audible in the stillness of the night. Leo led her through a side entrance into a dimly lit hallway, then down a flight of stairs. The door at the bottom opened into a small, cluttered room, lit by the pale glow of a single desk lamp. "This is it," Leo said. "It's not much, but it'll keep you safe for now." Emily took a slow breath and surveyed the room. It was sparse, with just a few old chairs and a table in the center, but it did offer a sense of security. She stepped inside, and Leo closed the door behind her. "You should rest. I'll keep an eye on things upstairs," he said. "We'll figure out the next steps once we know more." Emily didn't respond immediately. She felt the exhaustion from the night's events weighing heavily on her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over yet. She glanced at Leo. "How do you know all this? Why are you helping us?" she asked, her voice cautious. Leo didn't immediately answer. He moved to the desk and began sifting through some papers. "Let's just say I've been watching the situation for a long time," he said, his tone steady but distant. "I knew what was happening before it even got this far. I didn't expect things to escalate so quickly, but I'm not surprised." Emily crossed her arms, her gaze fixed on him. "You're not answering my question. Why get involved?" Leo finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Because I've seen what happens when people like Marcus, and you, get caught up in things you don't understand. People get hurt. Worse, they get used. I don't like seeing that happen." Emily felt a twinge of skepticism. "And what do you want from all of this? You expect me to believe you're just doing this out of the goodness of your heart?" Leo sighed, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "No, I don't expect you to believe anything. But right now, you don't have much choice but to trust me. We're all in this together, whether we like it or not." Emily didn't respond. The words hung in the air between them, thick with unspoken tension. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized she didn't have another option. Marcus was at risk, and so was she. This was bigger than both of them, and if Leo could help her get to the bottom of it, then she had to rely on him, at least for now. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice firm. "We wait," Leo said simply. "We keep a low profile, gather more information, and see who else is involved. Once we have everything we need, we strike." Emily nodded, though the plan felt far too passive for her taste. She wasn't someone who liked to sit back and wait. She was a fighter, and every moment they spent in this room felt like a wasted opportunity. But she also knew that rushing in without the proper information would only get them killed. She glanced at the window, her mind already working through the possibilities. "How long until we can move on them?" she asked. "Patience," Leo replied. "It's the key to winning this fight. Rushing will only make things worse. We need to know who's pulling the strings, and until we do, we stay hidden." Emily didn't like it, but she could see the logic. For now, they had no choice but to play the waiting game. As the hours passed, Emily stayed alert, listening to every sound outside the room, every footstep in the hall. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not when they were this close. Leo remained quiet, his back to her as he continued working, his mind clearly focused on the task at hand. Emily paced the room, her thoughts whirling. She had always been a step ahead of her enemies, but now, for the first time in years, she felt out of control. She wasn't sure who to trust, and the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. But she was in too deep to back out now. She had made a promise to herself and to Marcus. She would stop whoever was behind this, no matter the cost. She took another deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This was only the beginning, and she wasn't about to let anyone take her down. Not now. Not ever. The hours dragged on in the small, dimly lit safe house, and Emily's unease only grew. She had been pacing the room for what felt like an eternity, her mind racing as she processed everything she had learned so far. The tension between her and Leo was palpable, though neither of them had said much in the last few hours. Leo remained glued to his computer, monitoring any developments that might lead them closer to the people behind the conspiracy. Emily couldn't sit still, her thoughts constantly shifting from one possibility to another. Every detail, every interaction with Marcus, every message she had received, was spinning in her mind. Something wasn't right, and she had to find out what. Leo's voice broke the silence. "We've got movement," he said, his tone calm but filled with urgency. Emily's head snapped toward him. "What do you mean?" she asked, her pulse quickening. Leo turned his chair toward her, his eyes focused on the screen. "Someone's making a move. It looks like one of the names we've been tracking has just reached out. I think they're getting ready to act." Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. They couldn't waste any more time hiding. "What do we do?" she asked, already thinking ahead. Leo stood up, his gaze meeting hers. "We follow the lead. This could be our chance to catch them before they make their next move." Emily nodded, determination in her eyes. "Let's go." They quickly gathered their things, each movement precise, their minds focused on the task at hand. As they made their way to the van, Emily's thoughts raced. She had no idea who was on the other side of the message, but she knew one thing for certain: they were in danger. If this was the same group they had been tracking, they were going to need to be prepared for anything. Leo drove in silence, the city lights flashing by as they made their way to their destination. Emily kept her eyes on the road ahead, but her mind kept drifting back to the past few days. She had trusted Marcus, but now she wasn't so sure. Every decision she had made had led her to this point, but what if she had made a mistake? What if Marcus had been hiding something important from her? Her thoughts were interrupted as Leo suddenly turned onto a narrow street. The van came to a stop in front of an unmarked building, its exterior worn and unassuming. Leo turned to her. "This is it," he said. "Stay sharp." Emily's heart raced. She wasn't sure what they were walking into, but she knew it couldn't be good. She grabbed her gear, checking it one last time, and then followed Leo out of the van. The building was eerily quiet as they approached the entrance. Leo signaled for her to wait as he checked the door. After a brief moment, he gave her a nod. "We're clear," he whispered. They slipped inside, moving quietly through the darkened hallway. The air felt heavy, like the walls were closing in around them. Emily's senses were on high alert as they moved deeper into the building. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence. The creak of the floorboards, the echo of their footsteps, the faint hum of electricity in the walls. They came to a small room at the end of the hall. Leo motioned for Emily to stay back as he peeked inside. "It's empty," he said quietly, stepping into the room. Emily followed, her hand on the gun holstered at her side. The room was sparse, with only a few chairs and a table in the center. There were no signs of life, but Emily could feel the presence of something waiting. Leo moved toward the table, where a folder sat neatly on top. "This is it," he said, flipping it open. Inside were detailed files, names, photos, and connections. Emily leaned over his shoulder, scanning the information. "This is all about Marcus," she said, her voice tight with realization. "They've been tracking him the whole time." Leo nodded. "It's worse than I thought. He's been a pawn in their game, just like we suspected." Emily's mind raced. If they had been tracking Marcus, what did that mean for her? Was she also part of their plan? "We need to move fast," she said, her voice firm. "We can't let them get ahead of us." Leo looked up from the files, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm with you. We'll stop them before they can do any more damage." But just as he spoke, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Emily's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone anymore. Leo motioned for her to stay back as he moved toward the door, his eyes scanning the darkened corridor. The footsteps grew louder, closer. They were coming. Emily's mind raced, but she didn't panic. She knew what to do. She silently reached for her gun, prepared to defend herself. But Leo held up a hand, signaling for her to stay calm. He stepped forward, peeking around the corner. A moment later, he turned back to her. "It's them," he whispered. "We need to get out of here now." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Leo toward the back exit. She wasn't sure who was coming, but she knew one thing. They couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Not when they were so close to uncovering the truth. As they reached the door, Leo paused, glancing back at her. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. Emily nodded. "Let's go." They pushed through the door and into the night, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The game was far from over, and Emily knew they were just getting started. They moved quickly through the back alley, the silence of the night broken only by the sound of their hurried footsteps. Emily's heart raced, her senses on high alert as they navigated the dark streets. Leo was ahead of her, leading the way, his steps measured and deliberate. She kept a safe distance, scanning their surroundings for any signs of danger. Every shadow, every sound felt like a potential threat. The night had gone from calm to chaotic in the blink of an eye, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. "We need to get off the streets," Leo said, his voice low but urgent. Emily nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't stay out in the open much longer. The data they had obtained earlier was critical, but now it was a target, and they were the ones being hunted. They reached a nondescript building, its exterior worn and unimpressive. Leo quickly punched in a code at the side entrance, the door clicking open with a soft thud. Emily followed him inside, her pulse quickening. "This is where we lay low for now," Leo said, closing the door behind them. The dimly lit hallway smelled of must and dust. Emily could barely make out the shadows in the corners as she followed Leo down the narrow corridor. They arrived at a door at the end of the hall, and Leo turned the knob, revealing a small room. It was simple, barely furnished, with only a few chairs and a table in the center. But it was enough. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. "This is safe for now?" she asked, her voice cautious. Leo gave a short nod. "It'll keep us off their radar for a while." As Leo closed the door behind him, Emily could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They were out of immediate danger, but the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Leo moved to the desk in the corner where a laptop sat. He powered it on and began typing quickly, his fingers flying over the keys. Emily crossed her arms and leaned against the wall, watching him work. "We need to move fast," Leo muttered, his voice focused. "The longer we stay hidden, the more time they have to find us. We need to find out what they're planning, who's behind all this." Emily nodded, her mind already racing ahead. They had barely scratched the surface of the conspiracy, and now it was all starting to unravel. But they didn't have much time before the enemy made their next move. "What's the next step?" she asked, her voice steady. Leo didn't look up from the screen, but his tone was sharp. "We need to trace this data back to its source. Whoever is behind this is playing a dangerous game, and we need to be one step ahead." Emily's thoughts turned to Marcus. He had been a part of this mess from the beginning, unknowingly used as a pawn. She had trusted him, but now she was starting to wonder how much he had known. Was he complicit in this, or was he just another victim? "What about Marcus?" she asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Leo glanced up from the laptop, his eyes meeting hers. "What do you mean? Do you think he's involved?" Emily pressed. "I mean, he's the one they've been tracking. He's been used this whole time. But could he be more involved than he's letting on?" Leo sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know, but I've been in this long enough to know that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. We need to be careful how we handle him." Emily frowned, her mind running through the possibilities. Marcus had been her only connection to this world, someone she had thought she could trust. But now, everything was called into question. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Leo paused for a moment before responding. "We need to stay hidden for now. We can't let them catch us before we've gathered enough to strike. We'll use the next few hours to dig deeper, find out who's really pulling the strings, and get the information we need. Once we have that, we make our move." Emily nodded, a sense of resolve washing over her. They were in this together, and she wasn't going to back down. The danger was real, but she knew what was at stake. "Let's get to work," she said. Leo didn't respond, but the flicker of approval in his eyes was enough. They had no choice but to trust each other now. The next few hours would determine whether they could stop the people behind this conspiracy or become casualties of a game they hadn't even fully understood yet. As Leo continued to work, Emily stood at the window, watching the street below. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but she knew she had to focus on the task at hand. They had come too far to turn back now. The storm was coming, and it was up to them to survive it. The world outside felt distant, but it was all connected. Every decision they made now would lead them closer to the truth. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. They couldn't afford to lose. And they certainly couldn't afford to trust anyone who wasn't already in this fight. She turned away from the window and joined Leo at the table. They were ready. It was time to take the next step, no matter the cost. Hours passed as Emily and Leo worked relentlessly, gathering the final pieces of information they needed. The tension between them had only grown since the safe house, the weight of the task at hand pushing them both to the edge. They had uncovered the true extent of the conspiracy, and with every revelation, the danger they faced became more real, more immediate. They were up against people with vast resources, powerful connections, and a ruthless desire to maintain control. The world they had stumbled into was one of shadows, where everyone had an agenda and trust was a luxury no one could afford. As Leo entered the room, his eyes were sharper than ever. He had been on the phone with an old contact, trying to dig deeper into the people behind the operation. He had learned that the stakes were higher than they thought. This wasn't just about corporate power. It was about controlling global systems, manipulating governments, and shaping the future without anyone noticing. "We have to act now," Leo said, his voice intense. Emily could see the strain in his face, the exhaustion from days of nonstop work. "We've got the names, the connections, everything we need to take them down." Emily looked up from the laptop where she had been reviewing the files. "Then let's do it. We can't keep hiding, Leo. We've been waiting long enough." Leo nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of determination and something else, fear. They both knew that this was their final move. They didn't have the luxury of time. As they made their way to the front of the building, the tension in the air was suffocating. Every step felt like it could be their last. They had already infiltrated so many layers of the operation, but now, they were going straight for the heart. "We need to get to their headquarters," Leo said as he checked the map on his phone. "Once we're in, we disable their communication systems and get the files we need. If we're fast, we can cut them off before they can react." Emily's hand rested on her sidearm, her body tense and ready. She knew this would be the most dangerous part of their plan, but there was no turning back. They had come too far to back out now. As they neared their destination, Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She quickly pulled it out and saw a message from an unknown number. Asterisk, "They know you're coming. Don't trust Leo." Asterisk, her heart skipped a beat as she read the words. Her breath caught in her throat. She quickly typed a reply. "Who is this?" But there was no time to wait for an answer. They had arrived. The building loomed ahead, its glass windows reflecting the night sky. Leo led the way, his steps confident and measured. As they approached the entrance, Emily's mind raced. Was Leo really on her side? Had she misjudged everything? She couldn't afford to let doubt cloud her judgment now. They were so close to ending this. They entered the building quickly, their movements deliberate and quiet. They moved through the halls, avoiding security cameras and guards, until they reached the main office. Leo pulled out a small device and began to hack into the security system. Emily stood guard, her eyes constantly scanning the area. As Leo worked, the tension between them was palpable. Emily's thoughts were swirling. Could Leo be the one who had betrayed them? The message had said not to trust him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't Leo. They needed him to bring this to an end. Without him, they would be powerless. A soft click signaled that the system was hacked. Leo turned to Emily, his face pale. "We're in," he said, his voice quiet. "But we need to hurry." They moved quickly into the office, and Leo began accessing the files on the computer. Emily kept watch, every nerve on edge. Suddenly, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. "We don't have much time," Leo whispered. "I'm almost done." But just as he finished downloading the files, the door slammed open. A group of armed men stormed into the room, their guns aimed at them. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this would happen. They had made it too far. "Hands up," one of the men barked. Emily didn't hesitate. She dove for cover, her gun drawn in a split second. Leo grabbed the files and made a run for the back exit, but the men were closing in fast. "Get the files to the backup location," Emily shouted as she fired a shot, hitting one of the guards in the leg. She had to give Leo a chance to escape. The guards fired back, their bullets narrowly missing her as she took cover behind a desk. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't let them stop her now. As the guards advanced, Emily fired again, taking down another one. But she knew they were outnumbered, and soon, reinforcements would arrive. Leo was getting closer to the exit, but she wasn't sure if he could make it out in time. She had to buy him more time. She looked at the computer screen one last time, and without thinking, she hit the button that would trigger a massive data wipe. The files they had gathered were gone, lost forever. But in that moment, Emily didn't care. It was the only way to keep the enemy from getting their hands on the information. The building's alarms began blaring, and the entire place went into lockdown. Emily could hear the sirens outside, the sound of approaching vehicles. She had done everything she could. Now, all that was left was getting out alive. She turned toward the exit, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had done what she set out to do. The war was far from over, but for now, they had won. Leo had the files. They had the information they needed to take down the people who had been controlling everything from the shadows. And Emily, despite everything that had happened, felt a small flicker of hope. The fight wasn't over, but at least they were still standing. And that, for now, was enough.